I want you to picture a really specific scene. It's 1918, you're on the Italian front, World War I is just grinding toward this incredibly bloody conclusion. You've got artillery shells exploding, mud everywhere, absolute chaos, the smell of cordite in the air, and in the middle of this nightmare, there's a soldier, a decorated officer actually, crouched down in a trench. But he isn't cleaning his rifle or checking a map. He's writing in a notebook.
And just to clarify that image for you, he's not writing a diary or, a love letter home. He's writing symbolic logic.
Right. He is convinced, like utterly convinced, that the manuscript he's carrying in his backpack solves every single major problem of philosophy. Not just a few of them, all of them.
It's a level of ambition or maybe arrogance that would honestly be laughable if the guy wasn't an absolute genius. We are talking about Ludwig Wittgenstein. And that book he's writing in the mud is the Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus. It is arguably the most difficult, beautiful, and just maddening philosophical work of the 20th century.
But here is the hook for our deep dive today and why we are spending time on the logician. This isn't just a story about a guy who built a perfect system of logic. It's about a guy who built the perfect system, realized it was actually a trap, and then spent the entire second half of his life trying to burn it down.
Yeah, that really is the arc of his life. It's this wild journey from the desire for a crystalline, perfect world to the eventual acceptance of the messy, ordinary one. It's about why one of the richest men in Europe literally gave away his entire fortune to scrub floors. And ultimately, it's about learning when to just shut up.
Right. The famous line, whereof one cannot speak, thereof one must be silent. We are definitely going to get to that.
Yeah.
But let's lay out the mission here. Today, we're diving deep into the limits of language, this concept of burning the ladder, and how to find meaning when words completely fail us. For sources, we're pulling from Ray Muck's incredible biography of him, the Tractatus itself, his later philosophical investigations, and his final notes on certainty.
It is a pretty heavy stack of reading today.
The heaviest. So let's go back to those trenches. What was he actually trying to do? I mean, most people in a war are just trying to survive the day. Wittgenstein is out there trying to solve logic itself. Why?
You really have to understand the pressure cooker he came from. He was a Wittgenstein in Vienna. Think of like the Rockefellers or the Carnegies in America, but with more steel, more high culture, and tragically a lot more mental illness. 3 of his brothers actually took their own lives.
Wow. So he's surrounded by this intense emotional chaos at home, and then he goes straight into a war, which is the ultimate physical chaos.
Exactly. So the Tractatus was his attempt to find something that couldn't be destroyed, not by suicide, not by artillery shells. He wanted to find the rigid, logical structure that he believed lay beneath the surface of the whole world. He thought that if you could just understand how language hooked onto reality, you could clarify everything and just stop the confusion, stop the suffering in a way.
And this leads us to what's called the picture theory, which is really the core of that early book. How does that actually work?
Well, there's a famous story about how he cracked this. He was reading a magazine report about a lawsuit regarding a car accident in Paris. And to explain the accident in court, the lawyers used a miniature model. Toy cars, toy pedestrians, a little map.
Okay, simple enough. The toy car represents the real car.
Yes, but he asked himself why. Why does that work? It works because the spatial relationship between the toy car and the toy truck in the model corresponds exactly to the relationship between the real car and the real truck. The model is a literal picture of the reality. And Wittgenstein thought, that's it. That is exactly what language does.
Oh, I see. So if I say the cat is on the mat, I am building a little mental model where the word cat corresponds to the physical animal and the word mat corresponds to the rug.
Precisely. His opening line is, "The world is all that is the case." He argued the world is made of facts, not things. And a sentence is only meaningful if it pictures a possible fact in the world. So the cat is on the mat is meaningful because it pictures a fact. Even if I say the cat is on the moon, that's meaningful because while it's obviously false, it could be a fact. You can picture it.
I follow that. But, and maybe I'm jumping ahead here, this seems to imply there's a whole lot of stuff we say every single day that doesn't picture a physical fact.
And that is the guillotine of his early philosophy. If a sentence doesn't picture a fact, Wittgenstein says it is, technically speaking, nonsense.
Hold on. So if I say stealing is wrong, that's not a physical fact. I can't take a photograph of wrong.
Correct. So strictly speaking, that's nonsense.
What if I say God is love?
Nonsense.
Mozart's music is beautiful.
Absolute nonsense.
That sounds incredibly destructive. He's basically taking the most important parts of the human experience, ethics, religion, art, and tossing them in a trash bin marked gibberish.
See, that's the most common reaction, but it's actually a huge misunderstanding of his motive. He wasn't tossing them in the trash at all, he was putting them in a safe. He made this rigid distinction between the sayable and the showable.
The sayable being just the facts.
Right. Propositions describe facts, that's the sayable. Science, data, logic. But he believed that ethics, aesthetics, the mystical, these things are way too important to be mangled by our clumsy, everyday language. They cannot be said. They make themselves manifest. They show themselves in how we live and how we act.
Ah, okay. It's like trying to describe the taste of salt to someone who's never tasted it. You can talk for hours, you can give them the chemical composition of sodium chloride, but you haven't actually conveyed the reality of the taste. You just have to eat the salt.
That's a fantastic way to put it. He thought that by trying to turn ethics into a science or a logical debate, we actually cheapen it. And this leads directly to the famous ladder metaphor at the very end of the Tractatus. It's honestly one of the weirdest endings in the history of literature.
Because he writes this incredibly dense, logical book, numbered propositions, very serious, very mathematical. And then on the last page, he basically pulls the rug out from under the reader.
Completely. He says, my propositions serve as elucidations in the following way. Anyone who understands me eventually recognizes them as nonsensical.
Wait, he's admitting his own book is nonsense.
By his own strict definition, yes. He's writing about philosophy. He's not stating facts about the physical world. So he says his book is like a ladder. You use these logical steps to climb up out of the swamp of philosophical confusion. You climb up to get a clear view of the world. But once you are up there,
You kick the ladder away.
you throw it away. You don't need the philosophy anymore. You just see the world as it is, as a collection of facts, and then you remain silent about all the rest, the mystical stuff.
It's very zen for a guy who is so obsessed with mathematical logic.
It is. And he really, truly believed he had finished the job. He published the book, the war ended, and he basically said, well, that's philosophy sorted. I've solved it. I'm off.
And this is the part of the deep dive where I struggle a bit. Because if I had just solved all of philosophy, I'd probably take a tenure-track job at Cambridge, drink some sherry, and just relax. But Wittgenstein goes to the mountains to teach elementary school.
Yeah, he wanted to be what we might call authentic today. He felt that academic life was totally fake, just people talking air. He wanted to do something real, something humble. So the very first thing he does is give away his entire inheritance.
Which, again, we are talking huge money here. Generational, nation-building wealth.
Massive wealth. And the kicker is he didn't give it to the poor because he genuinely think money would corrupt the poor. He gave it to his siblings who were already filthy rich because he figured they were already corrupted by it, so it wouldn't matter.
That is a very specific, very strange kind of logic.
To say the least. So he goes to these tiny, remote villages in rural Austria to teach peasant children. And it is an unmitigated disaster.
Why, though? He's a certified genius. Surely he can teach basic math to 10-year-olds.
Okay, imagine you are a 10-year-old farm kid in 1920. You just want to play tag or go home and help your family with the harvest. And your teacher is this intense, nervous, aristocratic genius who demands absolute logical precision in every single sentence you speak. He treated these kids like they were little graduate students at Cambridge.
I could easily see that going wrong.
It went very wrong. He was impatient. He had a terrible temper. He would actually strike the children if they didn't understand the logic. It culminated in him hitting a boy who then fainted. And Wittgenstein essentially had to flee the village in disgrace. It was a really dark, shameful period for him.
But looking back at his entire arc, was this failure almost necessary? Did he need to crash into the messy reality of how children actually learn language?
100%. This disaster was the seed of his second great philosophy. In the Tractatus, he treated language as this fixed crystal structure, but in the classroom, he saw firsthand that children don't learn by mapping words to objects in a rigid logical grid. They don't learn definitions. They learn by doing. They learn by playing, by context.
But before he figures that out completely and writes his next masterpiece, he has one more major detour: the house.
Ah, yes. House Wittgenstein. After the teaching disaster, he goes back to Vienna. His sister Margaret asks him to help design her new townhouse. And he treats this building exactly like he treated his first book.
Absolute perfection.
Obsessive, torturous perfection. He designed the door handles, the radiators, the window latches himself. There were no baseboards, no moldings, no carpets, just pure, stark, unforgiving geometry. And then there's the famous story of the ceiling.
The 3 centimeters.
Yes, the house was basically finished. The cleaning crews were quite literally coming in to sweep up, and Wittgenstein walked into the main hall, looked around, and decided the proportions were wrong. He forced the builders to raise the ceiling by exactly 3 centimeters.
That's what, just over an inch?
Barely an inch. Imagine the cost. Imagine the frustration of those builders. But to Wittgenstein, that 3 centimeters was the difference between cosmic order and absolute chaos.
But could you actually live in it? I mean, it sounds like a museum.
His sister tried, but she later called it a house for the gods. It was cold, it echoed, she said it had no primordial life. And I think standing in that cold, perfect, uninhabitable house was a massive turning point for him. He realized that you cannot live in pure logic. The perfect system is completely sterile.
So the ladder finally has to burn.
The ladder has to burn. He returns to Cambridge in 1929. The quote-unquote god of philosophy returns. But he shocks everyone. He starts telling his eager new students that the Tractatus, the very book that made him an absolute legend, was fundamentally wrong.
Imagine being a student who traveled across Europe just to study that book. And the author walks into the lecture hall and says, yeah, ignore that, it's rubbish.
Exactly. He shifted his entire metaphor. He moved from language as a picture to language as a tool.
Okay, let's unpack that shift. How is language a tool?
Think of a literal toolbox. You open it up and you have a hammer, a saw, a ruler, maybe a pot of glue. They all do completely different things. You can't say there is one single essence of what a tool is. A hammer isn't true or false. It's just useful for a very specific job.
And words are the tools in this analogy.
Exactly. In his later book, Philosophical Investigations, he uses this famous example of a builder. A builder yells, "slab," to his assistant. Now, in his old theory, the word slab is just a picture of a stone block. But in the real world, yelling slab is a command. It means, bring me a slab right now. The assistant doesn't stand there contemplating the object. He performs an action.
So meaning isn't about what a word points to in the physical world. It's about how the word is used between people.
Meaning is use. That becomes his ultimate slogan. And this leads directly to his new concept of language games.
I've always really liked this term. It sounds friendly, but he means something very specific by game, right?
He does. He asks the reader to define what a game is. What is the one single feature that chess, soccer, solitaire, and Ring Around the Rosie all have in common?
Well, competition.
Solitaire has no opponent. Ring Around the Rosie has no winner or loser.
What about rules, then?
A kid just throwing a ball against a wall for fun is playing a game, but there are no codified rules.
Okay, I see. There isn't one single thread that runs through all of those activities.
No, there isn't. There is just a crisscrossing network of similarities. He called it family resemblance. You might have your mother's nose and your father's eyes, but there isn't one family feature that every single relative shares. Language is exactly like that. It's a family of games. Praying is a game. Cursing is a game. Doing quantum physics is a game. Flirting is a game.
And the huge mistake we make, especially the mistake philosophers make, is trying to apply the rules of one game to another game.
Bingo. We get into massive trouble when we try to apply the strict rules of the science game to the religion game or the ethics game. We ask for empirical proof of God in the same way we ask for proof of a boiling point. But Wittgenstein says that's just playing the wrong game. It's a category error.
So his view of philosophy totally changes. It isn't about discovering new facts about the universe anymore. It's about therapy.
He literally called it therapy. He said the philosopher's actual job is to show the fly the way out of the fly bottle. We get trapped in these little glass bottles of our own making because we misuse our tools. We take a word like time or knowledge out of its ordinary stream of life, and we freeze it and stare at it, and suddenly we get totally confused by it.
Because language has gone on holiday, as he put it. He wants to bring the words back home.
Yes, back to the rough ground. Back to the ordinary, everyday human context where they actually work.
Speaking of the ordinary, we have to talk about the beetle in the box. This was in the outline as a key thought experiment, and I want to make sure I get it right for the listener. It's his argument against the idea that we are all just these isolated individuals trapped in our own heads, isn't it?
Right. This is his famous attack on the idea of a private language. So imagine everyone in the world has a small box, and everyone looks inside their own box and says, I have a beetle in here. But, and this is the crucial rule, no one is ever allowed to look inside anyone else's box.
Okay, so I know what my beetle looks like, but for all I know, your box could be totally empty, or could have a piece of paper in it, or something that constantly changes shape every time you look at it.
Exactly. We have no idea what's in the other boxes. But we all still use the word beetle. We use it in conversation seamlessly. We say things like, my beetle is sluggish today, or my beetle grew a little bit. So Wittgenstein asks this brilliant question. Does the word beetle actually refer to the physical thing hidden in the box?
Well, if nobody can ever see it but me, no, it can't. Because the actual thing in the box doesn't matter to the public game we are playing. We're playing the game with the word, not the hidden object.
Precisely. The thing in the box drops out of consideration. It cancels out. He's using this weird analogy to talk about things like pain or internal sensations. We tend to think, I know what pain means because I feel it privately inside me. But Wittgenstein says, no, you don't. You know what pain means because you learned the public social game of pain. You fell down as a kid, you cried, adults comforted you, they taught you to say ouch, they bandaged your knee. Pain isn't a private object you examine internally. It's a shared public practice.
That is actually a huge relief, honestly. It totally kills solipsism. It kills that lonely, terrifying idea that I am the only mind that truly exists. We are publicly connected through language, whether we like it or not.
We are intimately woven together by these games. And this brings us to the very end of his life, which is quite moving. He's dying of prostate cancer in 1951, and he's writing these late notes that eventually get published as Uncertainty. And he tackles the ultimate philosophical doubt. How do I know anything is actually real?
It's the classic Matrix question, right? Yeah. How do I know I'm not just a brain in a vat being fed a simulation?
Exactly. And Wittgenstein tackles it practically. He says, look at a door. For the door to turn, the hinges must stay put. You literally cannot doubt everything at once, or the whole structure collapses.
He called them hinge propositions.
Yes. Things like, I have a physical body, or the earth has existed for a long time. We don't scientifically prove these things every morning. They are the hinges. If you try to doubt them, the door falls off. The language game completely stops functioning.
But didn't Descartes base all of modern philosophy on the idea that we should doubt absolutely everything? I think, therefore I am.
Yes, and Wittgenstein is directly arguing that Cartesian universal doubt is practically impossible. To express doubt, you have to use words. And those words rely on a community and a history and a shared context. If I say, I doubt that I have a mouth, I can't even speak the doubt without proving it wrong. The very fact that we are asking questions implies there is solid ground beneath our feet.
So you can't rationally doubt that you have hands. Because to even express that doubt, you have to use language. And language relies on the certainty that you are a human being speaking to other human beings in a shared reality.
It's almost like he circled all the way back to the beginning of his life. He was always looking for a foundation. In the early days with the Tractatus, he thought the foundation of the universe was pure, crystalline logic. In the end, he realized the foundation was just us, our shared human life, the riverbed of our actions. We act. That unthinking action lies at the very bottom of the language game.
It seems like this incredible journey from a desperate need for absolute control to a kind of exhausted surrender.
A surrender to the ordinary. And that's why the burning metaphor was so important to him. He didn't just burn his philosophical ladder, he actively burned his personal life too. He was a deeply tormented man. He was gay in a time and place where that was illegal and intensely reviled. He was constantly consumed by guilt, feeling that he was somehow indecent or impure.
He actually confessed his sins to his friends, didn't he? Like, formally.
Yes, very randomly and intensely. He would show up and force his friends to sit and listen to him confess that he had been unkind to a colleague or that he had lied about his Jewish ancestry to avoid prejudice. He wanted to be completely pure. He wanted to be transparent. He treated every single conversation with this absolute, exhausting, moral seriousness. He literally burned his personal diaries and notebooks because he couldn't stand the messiness of his own mind.
Which brings us to the deathbed, 1951. He's in Cambridge. He's staying at the home of his doctor because he didn't want to die in a hospital. He knows the end is coming in a matter of days.
The doctor's wife, Mrs. Bevan, comes into his room to tell him that his closest friends are arriving the next day to see him. And Wittgenstein knows his body is failing. He knows he won't make it through the night. So he looks at her and says, tell them I've had a wonderful life.
Wow, that really stops you cold.
It does, because if you look at the raw facts of his life, the severe depression, giving away his wealth, the trauma of the trenches, the terrible loneliness, the rages, it was definitely not a wonderful life. Not in the standard Hallmark greeting card sense. He was rarely what we would call happy.
So what do you think he meant by that?
I think he meant it was a life of absolute, uncompromising intensity. He never coasted. He never accepted a half-truth. He burned the ladder every single day of his life. He constantly climbed out of the confusion, even when it hurt. And I think in those final moments, he finally reached that clearing he always wrote about.
The clearing where the philosophical problems just dissolve.
He once wrote in his early notebooks, "The solution to the problem of life is seen in the vanishing of the problem." Maybe at the very end, the problem of his own tortured existence just vanished, and he saw the wonder of it all.
It reminds me of the duck rabbit illusion that we touched on in the outline. You look at the drawing, and your brain says, that's a duck. Then something clicks, and suddenly it's a rabbit. The ink lines on the paper didn't change at all, but you changed. You saw it differently.
That's the ultimate hope of his later philosophy, that learning isn't always about accumulating new facts. Sometimes it's just about that click. Seeing the ordinary world, this messy, chaotic, deeply confusing world, and realizing it's actually enough. The real wonder isn't discovering how the world is put together, but simply that the world is.
So for the listener today who might be feeling a bit overwhelmed by the logic and the Beatles in boxes and guys yelling about slabs, what is the real takeaway here? Do we all need to go out and read the Tractatus tonight?
Honestly, probably not, unless you really enjoy getting a headache. The practical takeaway is to start paying close attention to your own language games. Notice how you are using words in your everyday life. Are you spinning your wheels, creating massive anxiety and problems that don't actually exist outside of your own head? Are you demanding absolute mathematical certainty in a game like love or politics or art that just doesn't offer it?
Stop banging your head against the glass of the fly bottle.
Exactly. Look at what's right in front of you. The cup of coffee on your desk, the conversation with your friend, the rough ground. That's where actual life happens, not in the abstract clouds.
And maybe, just maybe, be okay with a little bit of silence every now and then when words fail us.
I think Ludwig would definitely approve of that.
Thanks for climbing the ladder with us today. It's an incredibly dense topic, but hopefully the view from up here is a little bit clearer for you. And it leaves me with one final thought to chew on. In our modern rush to build artificial intelligence, to create language models that perfectly map words to reality, are we just repeating the mistake of the early Wittgenstein? Are we building a perfect 3-centimeter raised house of logic that no human soul can actually live in? Something to think about.
And remember, throw the ladder away when you're done.
We'll see you in the next deep dive. Stay curious.